This is an optional tool, but one which by the time you're doing all these tools, it's nice to have these type of specialty tools. And I should point out too, by the way, these tools, you're gonna have your hand out, and then you're gonna make them. And then the first thing that you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to check your tool impression marks and see if they're leaving marks the way that you want. So you want to do that if you don't want to spend a lot of time running through forging. The best way to do it is to use plasticine. And then run through and make sure that your tools are all leaving impressions the way that they need to. If you can make adjustments on the tools that you have, then go and make those adjustments until they're working right. And if you find that you've made one too big or too small, rather than converting that one, if it's possible, you might even just consider just making another one. I do a lot of three-dimensional horse heads out of 3/4 inch stock, and when I was making my tools, every once in a while I'd make one that was a little small. That just allowed me to make other size and type of heads. So if you're going along and, for instance, you make like a punch for the eyeball, and you have a little weasel eyeball for your bear, well, now you can make a weasel. So keep the weasel eyeball and make a bear eyeball punch as well. This butcher style punch or fuller is for the eye here, but the slant here would be to the cheek side. So you still have a hard ridge for the eye, for the brow, but then the rest can sort of slope down into the face. Okay, so grinding. I'll do a little bit of grinding. Mostly I'm doing filing. Grinding is obviously going to save you some time. And it's, unless I have the opportunity to do hot work, I generally prefer to do grinding. But when you're doing grinding, consider that this is another tool that you need to be safe around. You should have guards and tool rests. Don't have any loose clothing or hair. A lot of people think that I wear my hair in a man bun as a fashion statement. It's because I don't want it getting stuck in any wheels or moving parts. You want to respect the machine, know where your body is. A lot of people don't have a lot of experience on these tools, and you need to think about how you approach these tools and use them in your body positioning. So I kind of like to use the analogy of the way that you address your anvil. You want to have a good distance from your anvil to where you're standing comfortably, and both your feet are flat on the ground, and you're not leaning or you're not too close. And you don't want to apply excessive pressure to where if you slip, you could move into the belt or something like that. So just be careful when you start incorporating tooling into your shop. This could be power hammers or anything. Learn the safety protocols for those things and be careful. So for grinding positions, my grinding videos in here are pretty brief, but I don't have the guards and the rest on because the pictures and everything have a little bit more clarity. There's less going on in the video, but with this tool you want to get an angle onto the business end to where you're going to get a slope. I like to grind in an up position because then I can see if my if my business end is square. So am I putting 90-degree corners on there, or am I starting to go sort of rhombus, just like with forging? I can also see the size, so I can see if I'm going to grind too far. I should mention that this is the same tool essentially as the one that Victoria just demonstrated. The business end is the same size and same radius, so it matches up to the other tool. And to get that, you're going to add an extra 1/8 of an inch of thickness. So where hers was to an end that was 5/16 by 3/4, this is 7/16 by 3/4. Okay, now I just usually square up the ends. I'm going to get my bevel on here. When I'm satisfied with that, I'll take my corners off, just like I'm making a round end. So you take the corners off, and then the corners off of the corners, and then you round everything up. And now I want to hit my corners, and I want to basically have little sort of ball ends on the corners here. And I'll match that up with the bob punch, the little round ball fuller that we're going to be doing. so that those match each other, so that when you're making your eye, you can use where this one ends at the corner of the nose there. You can set that little bob punch in there, and you can clean up with the bob punch for adding detail up in the eye, right up in here. Okay, you're going to have a side set, and there's a lot of these. I'm just going to try to go to some of the specifics of the sizing with these. This is going to be after you're going to cut in with your hot cut here to isolate stock, to have a definition between the gums, the lips, and then the teeth right here. After you've got the cut there, then you've got a little impression to set this tool into, and it's really for pushing the material. It's not a sharp edge there. It's to stand everything up and add definition. So there's a little bit of a glare. You can actually see the edge comes over to about here. So it's about 85 degrees. This is very, very close to 90. You're going to do, for this one, you're going to do a 1/4 of an inch taper at the end. It's just a square taper. And then after you've forged that square, then you'll file or grind to 85 degrees. About, it's, blacksmith 85 degrees. Okay, so we'll just do a quick tapering video here. You're going to use the round side of the hammer, turning 90 degrees between hammer blows. You'll notice I rolled it 180 degrees at one point to do even forging. And then after you use the round side with the horn, then you're going to come to the face and clean up all the edges and chamfer your corners. And again, notice that, I'm working with some heat. Now it looks like it's getting a little cold here. And in my shop, Victoria and I had some really bright LED lights to pick all this stuff. So all my videos look like the color range of my stock is actually darker than it really is in actual fact. So bear that in mind. If you were in a shop that you didn't have a lot of, hot glare coming off of bright lights, and you were getting into those ranges, then I wouldn't be forging those low. But in my shop, it actually appears to me a little bit brighter in color. And then this one is super easy. You're just tilting to about an 85 degree angle, try to keep everything square, and press in until you've got the angle established. This tool here, you want to just take the sharp off of it because you don't want it to cut. You want it to be pushing around. So after you've done that, then you can use a file and maybe a little bit of sandpaper to clean that up so that you're not leaving any hard lines or marks. Okay, so now we're getting into detail punches. These are all the ones that are going to have round tapers. We have an ear punch, which is going to be 3/8 of an inch at the end, 3/8 of an inch around. You have this bob punch, or you might know this as a ball fuller. That's a 1/4 of an inch around at the end. And then you have this one, the eye punch. You have to make this bob punch to make the eye punch. The other dimensions on this, sorry, this is 5/16 because you have to have a good footing for this punch to fit into, then you'll grind or file down. This one here will be 3/8 of an inch at the end, and then this edge here will be 3/8 of an inch long. So this finished diameter here is about half, but what I'm looking for is after starting at 3/8 of an inch diameter around, I have this 3/8 inch long edge on the business end. So you're going to do square, octagon, round. Use good forging principles. It's especially important when you're using tool steel to use good forging principles, because the types of stresses that you'll get in mild steel will be amplified when you use tool steels because of the addition of the other elements in steel. So you'll show any flaws in your forging when you do it with tool steel. So this will be for the ear punch. It's kind of like a center punch. And we're going to take this from square to octagon to round. I'm going to take the corners off of the corners. And then after that, I'll take another heat and then I'm going to roll this. Now you could you could work on, just rounding the ends. On my tools, I like to work up into the stock, but you'll notice that marks are an octagon. A lot of that's just really aesthetic preference. So, make this tool your own. What matters is that you have 3/8 of an inch round at the end. So this is basically a recap, but this is good to see where this is used. This is going to punch into the ear. And I would say, I don't know, maybe this is like a 45-degree angle ish. So with the ear punch, again, I see a lot of people, they'll grind their center punch points, off to the side. So perpendicular to rather than the platen rather than up and down. But again, I like to see when my point is meeting in the middle, which I can see when it's above and it's in my view. And I like to start with a short taper, and then just like with a taper when you're forging, you do a short taper and then you extend that back. So I did a little bit of a short taper, and then I continued to grind, turning as I went until I got my 3/8 of an inch. The bob punch, and this is where I was saying it kind of matches up to the sort of ball end corner on the fuller. You can see it can be used in there to define the eye where it meets the ridge of the nose. You're going to take that to a 1/4 of an inch round and file the end so that it has no sharp edges, essentially a ball. And this is a real good tool to use that shoe shine deal that Victoria showed you. So we're going to be squaring the end up a little bit. Now my hands are out of position because I was trying not to work around. So you'll see right here, I'm a little awkward how I'm filing because I'm trying to file backwards and stay out of the view of the camera. But essentially what you do is you approach this like you would a square octagon round taper as well. You'll do a bevel all the way around. And when that bevel is about the size of the flat little spot you have on the end, then you take the corners off of the corners and the corners off of those corners. And then finishing with sandpaper really helps with that, especially when you can wrap that sandpaper around the edges. It'll take out any hard edges. And that's pretty important when you're doing something like that, because all those hard edges can show. Now, sometimes that's texture, and it really depends on what you like to see in your work. Eye punch. You're going to do a round taper to 3/8 of an inch. Now, you'll recall I said it's going to finish at 5/16 before you do your bob punch on the end. But you're going to help yourself out by getting a little bit of a cup here. So you're basically doing a controlled application of fish lipping. It's what you're always trying not to do. And now you're going to try to really emphasize all the things you normally try not to do to try to encourage that. So Darryl calls this a slithering blow. You have to do it very lightly, because if you do a penetrating blow, then you'll still forge to the center of the stock and you won't get this cupping. So light blows will cause fish lipping. So that's one thing. Then this sort of glancing blow that I'm going to show you is going to cause lipping. And then also turning my stock so that I'm forging a round taper, that will cause fish lipping. So hopefully those all combine to get you a cupped end like this. And then you can set the bob punch into that cupped end and clean the concave inner surface up using the bob punch. So you can see I'm doing a glancing blow that's coming off this way towards the off edge of the anvil, and I'm striking lightly and turning as I go. All of those things encourage cupping. I use this same principle when I'm doing cupping tools on large tools for making hammers. Once I've gotten that cupping where I want it, then I'll do this. I'll clean this end up to the 5/16, and I'm continuing to turn it because I want to emphasize that that cup. Now I'm going to take the bob punch that we just made. The bottom end's resting on the box of my vise. And now I'm going to turn it so that I equalize any irregularities, and then I'm going to steer it and aim it at any areas of this punch that I want to try to target. So this got a little out of whack, and then I had to do a little bit of straightening before I did filing. Now, you can do these two different ways. On my tools, I like to have a little bit of a sharp edge on the rim, which helps you get a little bit of a bite, but that adds kind of a hard look to your forging. So looking at Mark's, this is a little bit more rounded on the edge, and I think that's gonna just that's gonna lend a little bit to your aesthetic preference. And again, this is gonna be your bear head, so if you want more texture or whatever, make it the way that you want it. But basically, you're going to now file the excess off, leave a little rim. You can soften that up and round that up and leave the rim, or like I did, I put a little bevel on mine, and that helps it bite just a little bit. For mine, sometimes I have to push my eye up from a mass and then kind of move it around, and it really helps if you can grab on by getting a little bit of a bite, but then you'll get some sharper edges too, sharper lines on there. Okay, so I'm just going to clean up the end a little bit where I had some excess thickness, and then I'm going to file until I've gotten that little rim. So it does have a little bit of a flat spot left. Then I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to keep on filing all the way around until I've gotten the thickness that I've decided I want for that to be proportionate to the work that you're going to do. And that is, just a fair amount of filing. Okay, so you have these fullering swages. Darryl calls them fullering swages. I talked to Mark about this, and concave fuller is another way you might think about this. This is just kind of like the exact same profile that you use for forging like pipe for bamboo in guillotine tools, that sort of thing. So it really is a fuller. You'll see it's a little flat on the end, so you can use it for planishing, but the edges are rounded up. I've always called these a fishtail fuller because it just reminds me of a fishtail. So this one's going to be about 1/2 inch wide and 1/8 of an inch thick on the end. This one's going to be maybe around 5/16 of an inch on the end, and about 1/16 of an inch thick. And that's plus or minus. These are kind of general guidelines. They're not hard numbers or targets. Just make your tools match in proportion to each other. The little one is for pushing up on the teeth, these canines here. This one's for fullering the ear from the inside of the ear after you've used your ear punch. So this end right here actually matches that little bit right there, matches the profile of the end of your ear punch. So that's what I mean by saying make them match each other. You're going to start with a narrow fuller or just a flat taper, and you're going to remove material by making a square taper. In other words, you're going to forge the end so that it's a smaller cross section, because steel forges best when it's compact and it has a good relationship, like say a 1-to-1 ratio between its width and thickness would be the same size. And then by the time you get above 3-to-1, if you were to hit these thin edges, you might cause this edge in here to buckle. And that's more important on tool steel too, because if you have buckling in here, you can actually propagate some cracks by forging on real narrow edges. So you want to keep things square until you take it to a flat. So here's this larger fullering swage, and I'm going to work both sides. And I started out maybe, I don't know, 5/16 on the end or something like that, 5/16-ish square on the end. And then by the time I flattened it out, it was the called for 1/8 inch by. And then, you got a smaller tool, then you do a smaller square. So this one was maybe 3/16 of an inch on the end. And then by the time I flattened it, I got it to about the 5/16 by 1/16. And it doesn't need to be really, really exact, but and you could always make this narrower on the end and then just file back a little bit until you've got it to the thickness that you want. So again, that looks a little darker. I'll continue to point that out. I wouldn't hit the stock if it was that color, but it's not a good representation because of the lights. It's a duplicate. You can use a triangular file. You could use the edge of a square or flat file, or you could use some edge grinding on a belt like I did here. You just got to know that if you're going to use a grinder for small, narrow sections like this, cross sections, it goes away really, really fast. So you're just barely giving a little buzz. Okay, we're getting into chisels now. There are 4. One of them is a flat chisel, and the other ones here are these curved chisels. We'll start with the we'll do an overview. The large curved chisels here. You're going to flatten to about 1.25 inches by 1/8 of an inch or so. It's better if it's narrow. Now, the one that I have in the video when I was filing was actually a second chisel, and it's a little big. So I want to point out that this edge, and this is Mark's, is very, very thin. And that's important because when you're cutting into a piece of work and you're doing this sort of figurative modeling or sculpting type approach to blacksmithing, you want these cuts to be as clean of a cut as possible without having, say, if you have a thick edge here, you might do some upsetting, and you'll take the mass that you're trying to work and you're going to scrunch it up and distort the edges. It's one thing that can happen. The other thing is if you got a big cross section, when you cut it, then you've got a big wedge, and then everything's going to peel back. So take a good look at how Mark's is made here. You can see it's very thin. You have the medium one for the tongue and the nose outline. That's this one here. And I should point out, this one is actually 5/8 inch H13. It's not 3/4. You could use 3/4, but it's a lot more work. And H13, by the way, is more red hard than 4140. Red hard is the characteristic that makes it more resistant to deformation while you're forging it because of the chrome and the moly. And then the small one here, you're going to flatten to about, actually, I think it was 3/8 of an inch. But you can see Mark's is done on the diamond here with he has a much shorter tool than the one that I've demoed. I did a flat taper and then I ran it into a swage. You can see that Mark did a, more of a diamond taper. And if I was to do this, I would get a little bit of a tool impression in here that was a little undersized, and I would come back through with like a rat tail file. This one right here is going to be 5/8 inch wide, and I used a 3/8 inch top fuller for that one. Okay, the curved and the curved chisel and the large flat chisel, those are all the same proportions when you start out. 1.25 wide by 1/8 thick. It'll put a little rounded cross section on the end, which you're going to cut with a hot cut, and then you're going to curve and file. You can see the indexing here is what we're pointing out. Here's the indexing. So it's I actually have this turned the wrong way, but you're going to have it parallel with the indexing. Works best. So you're going to angle slightly. You're going to forge both sides evenly. You can see the end is a little bit curved here. That's what we're going to remove with a hot cut. You're going to continue to work your flat plane back until it terminates at the same spot that your indexing terminates. You're going to go square to the center axis of the tool and trim with a hot cut just to make things faster. And then if you want to visually reference whether or not you've got a good even forging, this line here is going to tell you whether or not you forged this evenly. For instance, if you had a big hollowed concave section in there, that would be an area that you haven't hit enough. And as you hit it, it will fill out. If you have a bulged area, that's an area that you've hit more, and you want to avoid that until you've worked the adjacent areas. Once you've done that, you want to make sure that you're maintaining the same geometry. So don't elevate your hand when you're working the edges. You want to make sure that the stock is always flat on the face of the anvil. And here's another, this is an example of what I was saying. You want to terminate your bevel up where the termination of the indexing is. So you'll have this sort of peaked belly in here. Then you're going to when you hot cut, anytime you hot cut, you never want to cut all the way through. These things go ballistic really quickly and they fly to unpredictable areas. So that's my biggest concern. Secondary concern is I don't want to damage my tools. So you want to cut to where you've left a little bit of a buffer, you've got a little bit of a chad, then you go off the off edge and use your hot cut a little bit like a shear and trim off edge. And you're going to clean up in the vise with a file. This particular chisel has a V bevel on it, but you can do a chisel grind, meaning a bevel on only one side. Depends on what you're going for. Sometimes I'll do that if I want to, have a more clean cut on one side and then for it to peel up on the other. Not in this case, but just know that that's an option. This edge is sharp, and as shown in Mark's book, I would anticipate that this is rounded on that side, so that if you're working on a split, you can work your split open. The curve chisel. So the curve is done in a 1.5 inch round, half round swage. It's the same one that we use as a bolster for the leafing hammer. So that's good to know. Curve the back. You curve it back at least 2 to 3 inches. That's from this and up into the tool. You're gonna move the tool side to side in the swage to be able to target it so that you get an even curvature, and then file to finish with a half round. Here's the forging process for this. We're gonna forge that flat taper. You can see I have a slight elevation. It doesn't have to be a real big elevation. You can see there's a little hollow there. That area needs more work, and you can see it as I hit through there. Fast forward, we've got a cut started on the face. I'm going to cut off the edge of the anvil and a little bit off screen too, so that's cool. And then trim that off. Now we've gone over to a swage block with a 1.5 inch round. You could have a hardy tool for this. I'm using my leafing hammer because it allowed me to work where I wasn't going to interfere with my knuckles. So here you can see my knuckles are, That leafing hammer worked out really nicely because it has a long peen and it allowed me to get in here. But I usually will use my cross peen in a swage in my handle. I just and if you do the curriculum, then you're likely to have a leafing hammer too, so that's cool. Okay, so then you're going to take that and then you're going to file. This side is going to be your flat edge, and the back is going to be a bevel. This is a second tool that I used for this filing video, and it's thicker than I would make, but just bear that in mind when you watch the video, that you would want to forge thinner than this.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Can you turn the video down? It's loud. We can't hear you as well.
Oh, sure. It's usually not a problem. It's usually not real loud. It's been loud now.
That's better.
Okay. Okay, so I've got a bevel started here on the back, but I'm going to take this bit out here is what I want to show you, because that is going to create a lot of resistance on the cut, and you want this to be able to cut back pretty far. So I'm going to take all of that out to where it's not going to do a lot of upsetting and act like a big wedge either. So this is where it's used. It's used for the mouth with the curve down. You're going to file your edges, then you're going to heat treat all of these, except for with the exception of the one that we'll be getting to shortly. They're all 4140 and will be heat treated the way Victoria described.